the 1650s, the hornbook came out. The hornbook was a wooden paddle that had a piece of paper attached to it. The paper had the alphabet on it and a religious verse. The students were to copy down the verse to help them learn their alphabet. This was a good tool to have because students could learn their letters and sentence structures, also while learning the religion that they practiced then. Next came the magic lantern in the 1800s. This projected images that were printed on glass plates to students. This changed the classroom environment because students can now see images of what was actually being taught in the classroom. In 1801, the chalkboard was invented. It was used so that teachers could show examples to students in front of the whole class and not just individually. This is still something that is being used in classrooms today across the country. The 1900s brought pencils along with it. Just like chalkboards, pencils were soon to be found across classrooms in America. This was beneficial to students because they were now able to take notes on paper, and also it got rid of the individual chalkboards that students would carry with them. In the 1920s is when the radio came to schools. New York City's Board of Education was actually the first organization to send lessons to school through a radio station. Over the next couple of decades, schools of the air began broadcasting programs to millions of American students. However, this could be kind of negative for a classroom because not every school would be provided a radio and not every student could have one to listen to outside of school. Therefore, they wouldn't be getting those schools of the air in the same time as their classmates. In the 1930s, overhead projectors started to be used in classrooms. They were initially used by the U.S. military for training purposes in World War II. However, teachers started using them in their classrooms to show students examples as they were writing them and explaining them. I personally remember having overhead projectors in my classrooms when I was in elementary school still. This was able to help us see what our teacher was writing and thinking while she was doing it. In the 1980s, computers were brought into schools. This was something that was very beneficial to students because they could now have a more digital aspect with their education. To me, this is something that is still very beneficial to students because they're able to find research outside of the classroom and outside of what their teacher knows. It is found in many schools across the United States that have computers within their classroom or incorporated in some ways in the teacher's lessons. This can also be negative, though, for students in classrooms today, because now there are more options for them to find sources. However, those sources might not always be correct. Also, with computers in the classroom, students are now able to access social medias, which can get them distracted from what they're actually learning in class. Following the computer in the 1990s, the CD-ROM became popular to students and teachers. This is because they could now save information off the internet, on their computer, or anything else onto the CD and carry around with them. This later led to what we now use as flash drives, which is something that is still very helpful to students and teachers to be able to carry information from computer to computer and anywhere that they need to go. The next major thing that was brought into classrooms are smartboards. They were brought in the early 2000s and were replacing whiteboards and chalkboards. Smartboards are similar to both of those, however they are more interactive and students can benefit from them more. Teachers are able to set up lessons on the smartboard and students are able to come to it and actually touch it and move objects or go online, and it's easier for teachers to actually teach their lessons also. I was in many classrooms that have smartboards. I'm in classrooms now that have smartboards, and to be able to touch the screen and interact with it is really beneficial to a lot of students and helps with their learning process because they are actually able to touch stuff. Smartboards are something that I believe are going to be staying around for many years to come. iPads are some of the most recent things that are brought into schools. iPads are beneficial to students because they have everything they need at the touch of their hands. They're able to use the internet, able to get to books, and anything else that they need to make projects and find their classwork. I was lucky enough to go to a high school where each student had their own iPad that we were required to use for all 4 years. This opened us up to the idea of technology and how it can be beneficial in a school environment. I was able to look up any research I needed at that moment. I was able to make my projects right when the teachers needed them and find my homeworks online whenever the teachers had them posted or emailed to us. Having an iPad in my school life was something that made my schooling to me a lot easier than what it was before I had one. For younger kids in the classroom, having an iPad can be very beneficial, especially for the teacher's end. The teacher can have certain apps and certain games that align with her lesson plans, and that is able for the students to interact more with it. They're able to connect more to it because it's a game and it's something fun that they can do, which will help them remember the subject matter more. However, there are negative effects to having an iPad in the school because students are able to easily get to anything that they want, which means it's easier for a student to be playing a game while the teacher is trying to teach a new lesson. It's also easier for the students to be more disruptive and distracted through class. Having an iPad can be a fantastic tool to use, but it can also be a greater distraction in the classroom. I believe in the future that technology is going to be the main premises for education. Students who are in K-12 classrooms right now have been born into the technology era. They are students who were always used to the internet and always had computers and iPads and some form of social media their whole lives. So using that in the classroom is something that teachers are going to have to learn to incorporate in order for their students to actually learn and understand the information that they're going over. By the time that I'm a teacher, I believe that using the iPads or whatever electronic device is out by then is going to be something that's going to be super beneficial. The more interactive that technology gets with students, the better it's going to be for teachers to use. The iPads and the smart boards were just the tip of the iceberg. I believe there's going to be more interaction that students are going to be able to achieve using technology, and that's something that's going to mostly be used in classrooms now. I think there are going to be different apps that are going to be formed within the next few years that bring students more of a connection with what they're learning in the classroom. For example, I believe there's going to be apps where in biology, if you're learning about photosynthesis, you're going to be actually able to go into that plant and see things from a new perspective. New apps are going to show students how to do stuff without them actually having to go out and do it. It's going to already be at the touch of their fingertips. And I think that apps are going to be able to connect students from different classrooms together. So a student that's living in California can try and learn something from a student that's living in Georgia, and they'll be able to experience new things and learn from each other. Isn't that the point of technology? Technology is something that is bringing everyone together in the education field, between teachers being able to share new lessons with each other and students being able to have that interactive, touching, seeing what they're learning. Technology is improving education, and it's something that is going to keep changing every single day of the year.